Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Stephanie Marie. I'm on a mission to spread hope, sharing people's stories across all walks of life to encourage, inspire, and empower you. And today I'm so blessed and fortunate to welcome Jerry McKinstry, who's Assistant Vice President of Public Affairs at Pace University and has been my mentor for the past 4 years. Hi, Jerry.
Stephanie, it's so great to be here.
Thank you so much. We've had so many great discussions through mental health programs at Pace University and through so many different experiences that we've done at Pace. So I want to talk to you a little bit about you've worked in a variety of industries as a writer, an investigative journalist, a columnist. You were even part of an editorial board that was featured for a Pulitzer Prize. So can you talk to us a little bit about, walk us through your journey, or you've been in media relations as a professor. So can you walk us through a little bit about your journey and how that led you to where you are today?
Great, great. Well, again, thank you for having me, Stephanie. It's such a pleasure to have this conversation, and I'm really, proud to see how well you're doing with the podcast and see your ambition. So, on my professional journey, it is not a textbook path. It was a very windy journey. Sometimes you'd advance, sometimes you'd take steps back, sometimes you'd take sideways. But, I went to Manhattan College, now Manhattan University, and I studied political science and economics and philosophy. Um, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I loved all those different areas. And I first started out with an internship down at a major bank down on Wall Street, in the derivatives area. And if you've ever heard of derivatives, like I still to this day, I'm not sure what one is, but it's a financial market basically. And I that was part, my interest in economics and finance. But I quickly learned that it was not for me, that I didn't enjoy it. It was long hours. The prospect was for a good career was there, but I just dreaded my days. So again, I was 21 at the time, and I quickly realized that wasn't for me, but I didn't know what was. And that began a long journey of trying to find out what I wanted to do. So those early years were difficult. I explored many things. Um, and I did a lot of jobs. I bartended. I worked for nonprofits. I worked for government doing revitalization. And again, the Cliff Note version is I was seeking, but not finding the full answer. And then I think it was when I was bartending in New York City. It was directly across the street from the New York Times. So a lot of their reporters would come in and I'd hear their stories. And I was like, you guys get paid to do this? And that sort of, opened up my eyes in a little way. And then one day my father slipped, an advertisement for an open house at, a university in Westchester to go back to school. So I went back to school for journalism, and that opened up. I just was like, I was really made for that profession, and it really was my graduate degree in life, just learning about life and learning, how to write and learning how to communicate. And people are often surprised to hear this about me, but I was terribly shy. I was not a great conversationalist because I just was really an introvert. Well, that career opened it up because I had to overcome that fear of conversation, the fear of questioning. And I also learned how to communicate effectively, especially with the written word. I learned visual, how to, put together publications and that sort of thing. So I was a journalist for a good, 15, 16, 17 years. And it started out what we'll call, editor, managing publications and people, then moving to sort of town beats and police beats and crime, and then getting into politics. And as you mentioned, I was an investigative reporter, and all of that was just really a wonderful experience. It was hard work, and I was simultaneously teaching. I became a professor, did that for 10 years, really enjoyed that. And it was the dynamic of practicing and then teaching. And it really does relate to make you a better teacher and a better practitioner. Um, so again, I did that for a long time, and you referenced then my Newsday experience when I was a member of the editorial board. Well, that was another sort of highlight in my career where I went from a traditional, political correspondent to an opinion writer, and that was a change. And news where we came up with our opinions every day, and you had to sort of, make your case, and you were assigned a beat. And I covered, New York State politics, um, the governor's policies, just and the thing about a columnist, you have a lot of freedom. You're not sort of necessarily pigeonholed to one area or one beat. So that was a really a great experience for me in learning how to articulate opinions because I had spent much of my career as a traditional journalist where you didn't want anyone to know your opinions. You wanted to be just really objective. So again,
Mhm.
that was a great experience. And then, as many people know, the news industry was going through a lot of turmoil. And, that was led to another period in my life where, they downsized and eventually I was out of a job there and I had to make a decision about what I wanted to do and what I wanted to do next. And I never thought I would actually leave journalism. And one of the most important, this is a pivotal time in my life, was that I was I was interviewing at another major publication and was being offered a managing editor job, which if you asked me in the beginning of my career where I wanted to end up, that is what I would have said, a managing editor. And it was just something that I realized that the industry was changing so much and I didn't want to be a part of it because there was layoffs and, a massive transformation and I just didn't like the direction of it. So I made a decision not to say no when I didn't have a job, and it was probably it was a brave decision. I had have a family at that point. I had little kids. I made a decision I was going to change my career and pivot, and that's when I got into media relations and using everything I had learned at that point to transition to sort of agency work and help clients, with their public relations, with their community relations. And I did that for a long time. And from there, I got into politics, running campaigns, being a press secretary. Um, and again, it was one thing led to another. And then, 6 years ago, Pace had an opening for a job, and it really brought together a lot of my different experiences. And I had always loved university work. I think it's great working with students. I think there's a lot of interesting things going on. So that led me to Pace, where I've been, as I mentioned, for the last 6 years. And the Pace has opened up a whole new world. And we've met through Pace, and we've gotten into mental health programs and radical health. We work together. So it's been a windy road, one that I've enjoyed for the most part. Some of the turns I couldn't have predicted, but here we are. It's a trust in the process.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Definitely. And you went back to school at Pace while you were working at Pace. You went back to school to pursue your master's in digital media, communications, and filmmaking. And also now you're currently at Brown University's School of Professional Studies to earn your certification in, it's called MBSR, Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction. Now, me, as a psychology lover, I've studied psychology, so I find that really interesting. And we mentioned mindfulness very briefly, but you've really taken it up as wanting to learn for yourself and then also wanting to pass it on to others. So, can you walk us through that journey, really of lifelong learning, I would say, that it is because you are always wanting to learn and pass on to others. So, can you walk us through that journey? What inspired you to do mindfulness, especially?
Yes, well, thank you for the question. And I'm going to answer in two parts because the two that each one is a little bit unique, and then I'll bring it together. But the first part was when I was in my 20s, I was interested. I mentioned I went back to journalism school, but what
Mm-hmm.
I was also interested was film. And I was seriously looking at film programs. Um, and I was a film buff. I love film, but I decided on journalism because I was like, I see a practical path. I didn't necessarily know a path in film at that moment. So I made a choice. I made a choice to go to journalism. So when the opportunity, when I was at Pace, to get ingratiated with the film program here, I was actually doing media relations for it and realized it was a really good program. So again, with this sort of notion of opportunity right in front of me, I said, I want to be a part of this. So I registered and got a master's in digital media and film, and in the process learned the technical side of filmmaking and also made two documentaries with the team at PACE, the PACE Docs team, which is led by Professor Maria Lesquet, and learned. And it was such a great experience. It was probably one of my favorite educational experiences in life. And, that was one thing. And, you and I have talked about this. It was about, I didn't want to regret decisions. So it was in front of me. And again, there was the naysayers in my mind that were like, you're too old for this. Why would you do this? You're well beyond, you're 25 years older than the next, oldest person in the program. Why would you do this? And I just said, look, this is the opportunity in front of me. Let's seize it. Let's do it. And it was a fantastic experience. Shifting over to the Brown University, what I'm doing now in mindfulness is that, I was first introduced to mindfulness, 20 some odd years ago. And I read John Kabat-Zinn's book, Wherever You Go, There You Are. And it had a profound impact on me. So it was always a part of my journey, if you will, of being mindful, meditation. I'll tell you a story about, how I got into it was, again, when I was a journalist, I had a panic attack in a newsroom of, I was with 100 or so people in a meeting, and I didn't know what was happening. I thought I was having a heart attack. And I
Wow.
excused myself, and, I had the classic symptoms of not being able to breathe. My heart race is going. So I went to go see a doctor, and I assumed they would prescribe me something. And my doctor said, well, congratulations, you have stress. So, and he's like, I'm not going to prescribe you anything, but you have to figure out how to manage this. And that led me to go deep into meditation and mindfulness as a tool of dealing with stress, anxiety, and that sort of thing. So, I've been meditating daily for 2 decades. And fast forward, 2 decades after starting it, and just having it be a part of my life, was that I again, a little over a year ago, had another great stress in my life, health stress, where, I had a heart attack. And you want to talk about sort of a life reaffirming moment. I was at this crossroads and again had to figure out how I was going to deal with stress, anxiety, and that sort of thing. So I decided it was time to go deeper, and that's when I enrolled in Brown Mindfulness, where again I'm on a 2 to 3 year path of learning how to become a mindfulness, an MBSR teacher. It's Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction, and I've always learned in my life that one of the best ways to be an excellent practitioner is to learn how to teach. So that is why I said I want to go all in. And it really is something that I do every day. It is an avocation that I really love. I know the importance of it. And again, how we met through Radical Health, I bring it to that program and say, okay, let's practice mindfulness. And what is mindfulness? It's living in the moment. It's quieting the mind. It's, not letting all the chatter, take over. And it's just a way, especially now, when I say post-COVID, with cell phones and all sorts of things sort of competing for our attention, I think it's important to have the tools to slow down, focus in the moment, and manage the stress that we all sort of face.
Wow.
And I hope to be done with the program in a year and a half. So
Wow. And that's an incredibly scary and just really traumatizing experience, really. And you've learned so much and you want to pass it on to others, which I think is a beautiful thing that you really want to help others to manage the stressors in their lives. Really, and I can't even imagine like what that is like. So it's just really it's really terrible and really sad to hear. You're really going on to help others, and I know like even in the Radical Health program with the athletes, even I remember you were doing the mindfulness with them, and you incorporated the mindfulness into that program, and you would just take a few minutes and show them the breathing techniques. And it sounds simple, but it's not. It's not easy to do. Like it sounds like, oh, it's just breathing, but it's not. Like when you're quieting your mind, you're really taking that time. All those outside noises like kind of get in the head, and it's hard. It's very while it's a simple thing, the breathing, it's very hard to do, to make it a practice, to I personally find it extremely challenging. It tests you in a way. It tests like your mental focus, your alertness. You're able to like sit with yourself, and all those thoughts really come up. So yeah, it's very challenging, I would say.
Yeah, you have to be committed to it, and it's not like it gets easier on year 10. Maybe it does a little bit, but you're always confronted with, your thoughts and, the monkey mind that has all these things racing, and you learn techniques to sort of manage it or to, sort of deal with it. And it's the most important thing is the effort. Come and do it every day. If you have to do it every day. There's days where I do it 2, 3 times a day. And there's this saying that if you are too busy to meditate or be mindful, for 20 minutes a day, well then you should do it for an hour.
Yeah,
Like,
I've heard of that. I've
you
heard of
know,
that. And I love how you are giving back to others. Like I love how you, again, it goes back to that lifelong learning. I love how you take these experiences that you had and you want to learn more. You want to help yourself, but you want to give back to others, like teaching them to help themselves as well. Because what's the saying? If you teach someone to fish, they fish for a lifetime. So you give someone a fish, they eat once. But if you teach someone to fish, they have it for a lifetime. And these skills, I know that the students in your mental health program that you run, I know, like especially I was in your program when you were the leader, and I know that I remember those skills. I remember that to this day, and I still put them into practice. So what you're passing on to people is something that they're going to carry with them for the rest of their life. They're going to be like, "Oh, Jerry said to take a few minutes to breathe and focus in the moment." So even when I'm busy, and it's going to carry with people. I definitely know that for sure. I want to
that's the
focus on.
reward.
Yeah, it
That's the
is.
reward
It
is
is.
knowing that you will take this and you will teach people and some of the others and teach their peers. And I hope one day to, and it may never happen, but one day to see these sort of tributaries of how far it's gone. And that the notion of that is, doing good and helping others is really the reward. And we don't always see it. We just have to trust that,
Mm.
we're being helpful in some way.
Definitely. And you wrote an article which I loved reading. It's called Finding Peace, Being Present in the Moment Through Meditation. And you said in that article, if you don't go within, you go without. And that's really been your Zen mantra throughout. So can you talk to us what that means, how people can put that into practice?
Yeah, it's and I read that somewhere and it just really resonated with me where, the existence we have, that we really have to understand ourselves. And that is the best way to sort of anchor yourself in this world is just to really go within. And that, can be for some people it's religion, for some people it's just, reflection.
Hmm.
And it might mean different things to different people, but you can't really do your best work without first knowing yourself and repairing yourself and sort of understanding, the reason we do things. So, I've heard this said often, and I tell it to my kids a lot, is that, you must love yourself before you can love another. And that is, also tied to, the sort of statement you just read is that, we just do better in this world when we understand ourselves in it and our place in it. So I think inner reflection is something that's very important. Study, it brings you more peace, when you better understand why you make decisions, why you may have a fear, why you may have a regret. It just helps you with decision makings going forward.
Definitely. And talk us through how can people start to practice mindfulness, whether it's through meditation or mindfulness in any way, because there's so many different mundane activities where you can practice. There's so many ways you can infuse mindfulness into mundane activities. I know, like I said, meditation can be really hard for people to get into the daily practice. But what are some ways that you think in their routine people can start to incorporate mindfulness?
Well, like you said, I mean, there's a lot of doorways into it, and there's apps, and there's books, and there's, a lot of practices.
Hmm.
But I would say the most simple thing to do is to focus on your breath. And it's when you sit down, quiet everything, put the phone away, shut down the email, sit down, maybe put a timer on. If it's helpful, maybe some soothing sort of, background music if that's helpful, and just breathe and let your thoughts, they will come. They will absolutely come. And you will get to a point where, and as I use this comparison, you're sitting by a river and watching your thoughts go by without any judgment. You're not saying it's good, it's bad, it's just you let them go. And that is what meditation and mindfulness has taught me, is that you will have thoughts, you will have judgments, you will have all sorts of things, but just try to observe them. Just observe and let them flow down a river. And that's why the practice is important, because it's very hard in the beginning, but you eventually get a little better at it. And you're just taking the 5 minutes, the 10 minutes, 20 minutes. I gave some advice to one of my colleagues at Pace, and their mind is, always racing. I said, just take 5 minutes, 5 minutes and breathe, and just focus on breathing. Listen to your breath, process it. So that's the beginning. That's the simple way in. And then, like I said, there's some apps. And then I would say after you get, you've done it for, whether it's a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever it is, take a class, read a book. You don't have you will not be this sort of perfection Zen Buddhist who is in the mountains on day
Yeah.
one. It is a process, and the most important thing is to stick with it. It's like going to the gym. You want to get in shape, going to the gym once is not going to get you in shape. You have to develop a habit. You have to go there, every day, or you have to go there every other day. So that the habit is the important thing. That would be my advice.
Yeah, and I think it requires discipline too of setting that time. I like how you refer to it as a non-negotiable, and I think that people should write a list of many non-negotiables in their life. But if this is something you really truly want to reduce stress, to help with easing the stressors of life, and find something, a daily practice, time set away from everything for yourself, you have to make it a priority. You have to set that time on the calendar. If it's the same time every day, or if it's getting away, if it's when you're not expecting it, just stepping away, taking 5 minutes on the clock, like just those little things really add up and make a big difference.
They do, and do. And you remind me of this story when I first started meditating. I didn't know if it was working. I
Hmm.
didn't, but I was committed to it. And I overheard my editor at the time talk about how something changed in me. And they weren't talking to me, they were talking to somebody else. And they're like, something's
Hmm.
changed. His writing, it's sharp, it's clever, it's this, it's that. And I overheard that and I said, oh, that's the meditation. And then
Wow.
I get feedback from my wife. I get feedback from colleagues, and they're like, "Yes, you've changed. Like you've changed for the better. There are good things happening." So it's now at the point where I'm so open about it that when I'm having a difficult time, the first question my wife or colleagues in the office will say, "Have you meditated today?" So
Mhm.
they're in with it. They're like, they know the sort of power that it has in my life, and it's a wonderful thing when your friends and family are like, we're in for some rough waters here. Have you meditated? And
Yeah,
that's
I
when you
love
know
that.
that it's working.
That's true. And sometimes you don't even notice the changes in yourself, but then, like you said, other people notice it, because sometimes we don't really realize how we've changed, but then it's visible, like it's inevitable. It's noticeable from others, and
That's right.
that's really amazing. I love that. And so you also been on, what was it, an 8-hour retreat?
Oh
You
yeah,
said
yeah,
an
yeah.
8-hour meditation retreat.
Yeah, I
And what was that
remember,
like?
the first one. I've been on several, and I have one
Hmm.
coming up this week, this
Oh,
Sunday. I'm
really?
doing another one. But I've also been on a 3-day retreat. But we'll
Hmm.
start with the 8 hours, and that was when I did the 8-week mindfulness based stress reduction course, and I
Okay.
did that at Pace University with Professor Sophie Kaufman. Um, and I remember doing the 8-week class, and the culmination is an 8-hour silent retreat, an all day silent retreat. I was terrified. I was absolutely like, I don't know that I can do this. This is a tall ask. Well, you go through it and you realize that it's broken up into segments, if you will. And then you get through it and you're like, wow, that was fantastic. So from there, I guess a few years later, when I registered at the Brown course, one of the prerequisites was, actually there's two prerequisites. There's an all week retreat and then there's a 3-day retreat. They you have to actually go to these programs. So I was doing a 3 day effectively silent retreat, and it
Mhm.
was amazing. I mean, it was just I got into the zone real quick, and it was helpful, and it wasn't that difficult. I mean, you just, you I couldn't have done it without the 8 hour. I couldn't have done the
Mhm.
8 hour without the 2 hour. I couldn't have done the 2 hour
Mhm.
without the one
You have
hour.
to build up to it.
You just build up to it, and it's like I use that comparison of weight training or exercise. You build up to it, and you learn more about yourself in the process. So when the opportunity came, like again for this weekend to do, I call it a tune-up. Now a 1 day silent retreat for me is a tune-up. It's just checking out from the world we're living in, which I think is really helpful.
Wow, that's incredible. I can't even imagine like eight. When was the last time that people actually sat almost a whole work day's worth of silence and inner reflection? And again, it seems scary. I think people want that, but then they're like, oh, I just wish I had a day where I didn't have to think. But then when you actually have that, it makes you go insane a little bit. I think at first, I think that would make me go insane, and then you get used to it. I think that the silence, because like you said, all those thoughts come up, all those regrets, maybe all those what's the word, automatic negative thoughts, the ants, they come up, they ruin the party in your mind, and you have to look at them, like you said, non-judgmentally, see them for what they are, notice them, process them, and let them go and move forward. So yeah, that's a really big piece of it. Like you said, people don't have to start with 8 hours. Start with 5 minutes, work your way up to 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour. So yeah, I really like that analogy.
It's important. I think it's especially important now when we are plugged in all the
Hmm.
time. If you're working, you have
Yeah.
email, you have text, you have your cell phone, electronics. We're always plugged in, and
Yeah.
we're just always on. And I think it's important to remind ourselves of, once upon a time we walked in nature. We were outside most of the day. We were walking barefoot, in the grass, and it's important to connect one with ourselves, but two, the environment around us, and I mean the
Hmm.
natural environment. And that's when we become I think that's when we find our peace, if you will. So,
Hmm.
I'm coming off a vacation in the Rocky Mountains, and I effectively, the whole group of us, my family, we put the phones down for much of the time and looked at nature. And then I remember we were, in the mountains, and I just said, listen to the silence. Like, this is important. What does this silence sound like? And it was amazing, and it was unplugged, and you come back refreshed, and you're reminded that we don't have to be attached to the phone and the email and all that all the time. And in fact,
Yeah.
it's probably important that we detach from it for periods of time.
I like, I think in the program, the mental health program, I think one of the speakers said taking a tech free day, like at least once a week, or if not once a week, at least once a month, just doing like a digital detox, I think they call it, where it's just all phones, computer, even TV, news, just everything you just need to shut down, just focus on people around you, focus on nature, focus on yourself, journal, meditate, all these different things. So I think that's a good starting place as well. Oh
And,
yeah, I love all that.
and Stephanie, what's I reflect on this often. I have children, and the difference is, like, my generation, we didn't grow up with electronics. I mean,
Hmm.
we were the generation where you went outside, and it was a very much spend the day outside. It's unplanned, it's not structured,
Hmm.
and go out and live. And I sometimes feel, I struggle with seeing the younger generation who grew up on electronics. Their brain has been wired in a certain way, and these electronics can be quite addictive. And I think the challenge right now for all of us, not just, a younger generation, is to let go of electronics for periods of time. They're great tools. They're very effective. We need them for a lot of things, but it's also important to remember that ultimately we're human living in this, the world we're living in. So let's take moments to just put them down and sort of check out and go within, remember, if you don't go within, you go without. So,
I love that.
that's important for us to do.
That's so true. And I love that. I really love that saying. And I think that that's a really good mantra to have as well. Living in the moment, really, essentially. I want to shift to what's your message to people who want to make, as you mentioned, there a lot of people feel like there's a lot of regrets, that they didn't take that step sooner or earlier on. And what's your message to people who really want to make, like you said, you made a career pivot. What's your message to people who want to make a career pivot? They're maybe having regrets that they didn't take that sooner. They really want to, they feel stuck, lost, confused, and they want to take that next step. What's your message to people that are feeling like that?
And I think most of us will have those feelings, so it's important
Mhm.
to understand that you're not alone in it. But I'll touch on regret first. And when I was younger, I had lots of regrets. And my wife actually said something to me that was very profound. And she's like, if any aspect of your life was different, you don't have this life you have now, meaning, my marriage, my children, where I live. So don't live in that regret. So I try to transmute regret in a sense of these things that I regret from my youth. Um, I let it fuel my future decisions or my current decisions. So I'll give you an example. I regretted not traveling abroad in college. It was a big regret of mine. So when it came time to go back to school and at pace, I did a week traveling abroad, making a film in France, and that fueled the decision. You remember, there's the naysayers. You're too old for this. Why would you do this? Well, transform that, not to regret it. So I made a decision going forward. So again, I try not to live in regret. I try to actually have it, influence my decisions. At this point in my life, I went back and again, I'm doing the Brown program, and again, I could have easily talked myself out of it because I've got a lot of other things going on, a job, a family, other things, and I was like, no, just do this because you learn to that it's rewarding and that it's enriching and it's really a great thing. And then it's just if we're talking about careers and people pivoting, it's never too late. The proper, like, I think we've been served up a sort of bag of goods about you're supposed to be here at 30, you're supposed to be here at 40. And I think throw that out. Just throw that concept out and say, you know what? It's never too late to do something interesting, to do something I want to do. If you want to pursue a career as a nurse at the age of 45 because you want to help people, do it. Figure out a way. There are ways to do it. If you want to write a book, go sit down and write a book. Don't put the pressure on. Don't put this pressure on that you have to write a bestseller or create paint a Picasso or just don't put so much pressure. Just take steps towards it, and you will find that it's so rewarding that you'll want to take the next step. And if my life is an example in any way, I could not have planned this out. There is no world in which I planned this out and it lands the exact way. So just take the steps in front of you one at a time. And I say this, like, Joseph Campbell, who is mythologist. He was at Sarah Lawrence. Studied all of these myths of different cultures, and one of the things he's famous for saying is follow your bliss. He would tell his students to follow your bliss. And I remember saying, like, I don't know what my bliss is. So I sort of changed that to follow your curiosity.
Mhm.
Follow what you're curious. And if you follow your curiosity, you'll find that it starts to add up, one piece after another to really make an interesting life. And so
Yeah.
that's, so my advice, just follow your curiosity and, doors will open,
I think
where,
what you said, if people are worried about finding the time, it's not about finding the time, it's about making the time. If something is important to you, you'll make the time, you'll carve out that time and space. And so another thing is you talk a lot about being a journeyman, for going on the journey, finding your way along the journey. So perfectionism trap, where you don't want to take the step because you know it's not going to be perfect, so it stops you from ever taking it, or you think it's not going to be perfect, so it stops you from ever starting. And I think that fear of failure stops people from starting, and they think, especially people in college, new grads, they think I need to have my whole life mapped out. And I talked about this in another episode. People think they need to have the dream job right away, they need to start out and like hit the ground running. And I think that it stops people, and that fear of perfectionism stops people, and a lot of people are feeling very lost, like I said, confused. So what's your advice for people who are worried about taking that step, taking that leap, feeling lost, especially new grads and college students, like people that are just entering really this first phase of their professional life?
Well, far too often you see it where people are climbing the mountain only to reach the top and realize they were climbing the wrong mountain. So my advice for young people, especially those who are grads, is don't think so far in advance. Like, you can always change. If you are an accountant and take a job at, the big accounting firm, and you can do that for a number of years, and if you realize you want to make a switch, you can make a switch, and build your life in a way that, the people around you support you and understand, so that you're not necessarily locked in, that you have to do this. And I think young people, and I was the same way, don't realize that you can always change. You can always switch it up. And it's just not to put so much pressure on, this decision will dictate the rest of my life. Now, what we do in the moment is important, for the direction we're going. So I don't want to be cavalier about that, but just understand that if it's like GPS. If you take a wrong turn, it redirects, and that's very much what life is like. You can always redirect. And then the second part of that is just try to enjoy it, enjoy the journey, and enjoy, I often do this when I'm driving, is I don't take the same route. It's because I want to see different things on even my commute, if I'm going somewhere, I try to switch it up just to see different things, you know. It reminds me, this is a movie that probably it predates your generation, but it was Dead Poet Society. I don't know if you've seen that.
I've heard of that. Yeah, I've heard of
Well,
that.
I was in high school when I first saw it, and I remember the teacher, played by Robin Williams, tells them to
Hmm.
stand on their desks. And the whole point was, you stand on your desk, you get a totally different vision of the classroom.
Hmm.
It looks totally different. You're a different perspective. And that is always sort of resonated with me, is that just try to look at things differently.
Mm.
We we run on this program doing the same things, same routines,
Yeah.
and just switch it up once in a while, and then look at things differently.
Yeah,
And
the GPS doesn't yell at you when you do something wrong. Like we basically, like what's the word? We get in our own head when we do something wrong. We're like freaking out, but the GPS doesn't yell at us. It just gently redirects. So we need to do that to ourselves and stop essentially beating ourselves up, or, what's the word? Getting in our own head and beating ourselves up over those mistakes, because that one failure is going to lead to your next step, your next opportunity, your next, path in life. So yeah, I really like that
we do
analogy.
need failure in our life. I mean, we do, like, it's an essential part of, evolving and growing, is having failure. Now, what I would say is, don't harp on the failure, learn from it, and
Hmm.
maybe not say that wasn't a failure. Like, I've had plenty of failure. I've had probably more failure than I've had success. And I don't necessarily see it as failure. I just see it as a stopping point or a learning point. And, if I harped on all the failure, um, you'd be real depressed real fast.
Hmm.
So again, it's just sort of saying, oh, what did I learn from that? Oh, I learned to do this, or I
Yeah.
learned not to do this, or I learned maybe there's a different way to do it. So, um, again, you mentioned the journeyman. I do view my life and my professional career as a journeyman. And when I was a young man, and I think I was actually a young boy, we used to have baseball cards, and my buddy Tim and I would be trading cards. And I remember one day he's like, "Oh, this is a journeyman catcher." And I thought immediately as a 10-year-old, oh, that's a negative. He's not an all-star. He's this or that. And years later, I look back and I said, man, I really admire the journeyman. That's somebody who keeps coming back, and he's hanging on, and he's fighting, and he's gritty, and he's figuring out a way to stay in the major leagues. Um, and that is very much what I think that many of us are doing, in our careers or in life is, we're on a journey, and
That's
embrace
true.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. And I think viewing life as a journey makes a really big difference. Like you said, when you view regrets and failures and setbacks, challenges, I think that makes a really big difference. Like you said, not viewing it as like, oh, I need to be the champion, I need to be the all-star. Well, you're the journey, or the person on the journey. So yeah, I really love that. And I did want to, I want to ask you, as I ask all of my guests, this podcast starts with hope, and I do believe that hope really, alters our life. And what role has hope played in your journey, and how do you hold on to hope today?
Well, that's a profound question. Hope is really, I think it's such an essential part. It's, you think about it, faith, hope, and love. Those are really key things that I was taught about as a young boy. Um, Hope really keeps us optimistic. The hope for something, you know, better, grander, fulfilling. Like it just, I think it's really important to hang on to hope because it gives us something to look forward to. And I would say, we want to have hope. We need hope. But also, I'll tie this back to mindfulness is that to live in the moment, stay in the moment. And, that hope for the day is going to be a good one and believe it. If you believe it, it tends to happen, So, hope is an integral part of having a good life, I think.
I think I agree. And I like how you equate it to mindfulness. I think a lot of the same values that come out of mindfulness equate to hope. And hope even is proven that it actually lowers our cortisol levels. It lowers our stress. People that have a sense of purpose and believe in hope, have less stress. And similar to mindfulness, where it actually lowers your stress. They show it under brain scans that it physically lowers your stress levels. So yeah, and then I think that's how it guides us in life, because we're not meant to live in a state of fight or flight our whole life, where we're constant, like we have stressors, but we can't thrive under those conditions. And I think that the hope really sets us forward and lets us enjoy the journey and like see the good moments, because if you just see those failures, as we talked about, you're not going to go forward. So I think the hope is like that stopping point on each step of the journey, where it's like letting us go forward. So yeah, I really enjoyed this discussion, Jerry. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that I missed that you want to add, or anything else you want to like throw in there, and then I'll weave it in?
Yeah, I think, and this relates to hope, but this is something I learned that was very important in journalism, and I think I apply it to my life. But
Mhm.
always have a North Star. Define your North
Mhm.
Star, your direction, and it's not a specific path, but it's effectively defining your values of who you are, what you believe, and it will guide you when you have difficult decisions if you have that North Star. And your North Star is got hope, integrated into that. So, define your North Star, who you are, what you're about, what's important to you, what your values are, and follow it because you will be challenged in a number of ways throughout your life. But if you have that North Star, and for me, it's, I try to do good, I try to speak the truth, and try to keep growing and learning. And that's effectively my North Star. And if you have that philosophy and follow it, I think it acts as a really good guide in your life.
It does. I think every person should pick, like you picked a motto and you picked a practice. And I think what I've taken out of this is I think every person should sit down with themselves, let's write their values, come up with some non-negotiables that you say, I'm going to do this every day or every other day, or at least every week. And I think starting with that, because it allows you to get back your routine, because sometimes we feel like our routine's slipping away from us with work and school and everything. So I feel like it allows you to have a piece of something for yourself that's really meaningful to you. and write down what gives you hope. Write down what gives you the thrive in life. Write down what is pointing you, what's guiding you. Like you said, finding your North Star. I really love that. That resonates with me a lot. Also, I studied philosophy too. I took a philosophy minor, so that's why you're so philosophic. It kind of like goes into mindfulness, but yeah, I love philosophy. But I learned so much, and I know so many people are going to take away so much from this. So thank you so much, Jerry. This was amazing discussion as always. Thank you.
Stephanie, it's been my pleasure. I'm so happy to see you thriving, and I am excited to watch your path, and I'm excited to see your journey.
Thank
So,
you. Thank you so much.
congratulations.
And thank you for, I really feel like you said, I feel like you're an example of lifelong learning, but I also feel like you're an example of bringing people on the journey with you. Like you want to pass it on to others. Like I think they call it like generativity. They want to pass it on to the next generation. And I feel like you're a really good example of that. So thank you so much for passing it on to me and then passing it on to everyone.
Well, Stephanie, thank you. That is a wonderful compliment, and
Thank you.
I appreciate that. So,
Thank you so much. Okay, so let me just finish here.